Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Welcome to the Lost Voice radio program, where we discover or rediscover the philosophical voice of our culture, the voice of truth, the voice of wisdom, and seek to bring it about to your daily lives. This is Jacob Nelson, along with John Studi. It's good to be back, John. I was gone last week, but I'm ready to go with a cup of coffee today and discover some craziness in our culture.
Well, Jake, I am absolutely elated to have you back. But, you have to tell me what happened, because all I know is when we were hanging out last week at the bar, you got a call, you said some numbers, and then you just left the room. And that was it. Nothing. And I didn't hear from you for the entire week. And I actually had to call Chris Apodaca to sub for you. Do you know what that's like, to stay on the phone with him for an hour and 15 minutes?
Well, here's the thing, is I have a rich history of Italian heritage. And I don't know if you know this, I've always loved spy TV shows. I love the show Burn Notice. Mm-hmm. There's some other spy shows I've really been into. And I was doing, this is true, by the way, I have a family history, like a family tree, of the Palumbo side. My mom's maiden name is Palumbo. And there's a woman, like a great aunt of mine, who her name was Anna Palumbo. And she mysteriously moved out of the country. And the only thing in my family record it talks about is that you can find her at the embassy in Portugal. And we don't know why. We don't know why our government knows where she is, but nobody else ever knew.
Interesting.
She was some typographer for a court, but I'm thinking that she was a spy. So when you said we were at the bar, which we really weren't, that's a good cover story, but you heard me say a bunch of numbers, and then I disappeared. The rest is classified.
And you can't, no telling?
All I can say is that there's a history in my family of spies.
In the family tree, is that like, the tree is your family, literally?
I do have trees that are part of my family.
Oh, that's interesting. See, I was thinking like a family tree at, family plot in the graveyard is what you're going for.
Yeah.
Are you going for that?
I don't know what I was going for.
No, I don't know what I was going for either.
It turns out a week off really has not helped me be any wiser, any more intelligent.
Because you're still coming to do the show with me.
Right. I'm still friends with you.
Which is clearly a mistake on all of our parts.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I was just talking to John, you, the listeners. I was talking to you about how you need to be closer to the mic because sometimes you sound hollow, and we determined that's because you don't have a soul.
Yes.
And so you're matter without an animating principle or form, and so that's why you sound hollow, because you are hollow.
Well, it's kind of like, I might be misunderstanding it here, but when it comes to the Eucharist, so the substance changes.
Wait, before you go any further, are you comparing yourself to the Eucharist? This is not a good path to go down.
No, I'm not comparing myself to the Eucharist. Obviously, I am not even worthy to receive him under my roof, as we say every single Sunday.
That's fair.
But no, so it's like, so God holds the accidents in being.
Yeah.
He sustains the accidents. And for me, kind of like my existence is that I have all these accidental qualities of speaking and moving and everything else.
Now, to be clear,
this
is a show on philosophy. But to be clear, you're talking about accidental in terms of philosophy, not in terms of your existence is an accident?
Both, actually.
Both? Oh, both. Okay. I thought God can't perform accidents.
Absolutely, I guess. Jake,
moving on from that, it's good to be back, really. I love doing the show with you, John, and it's really a joy. It was tough to be away for a week, but just some discernment in all reality of things in my own life. But God is good, and He is faithful, and I'm glad that I am back on air with you, my good buddy John Studi. In case you listeners have not picked up on it, we like to make fun of each other a little bit, make fun of the fact that we're friends, because we are really an unusual pairing in every aspect. Our first conversation ever was on the existence or the nature of time. And that's when, John, you were not yet a Catholic, and so I'm pretty sure I demolished you in some way, shape, or form.
Oh, I remember that.
I don't remember.
I had what was it? It was at a core team retreat. I remember being at St. John the Baptist in New Brighton because I remember bringing my massage table from home and sleeping on the massage table at the church. Because I used to be a massage therapist.
The thing is, I never have done a core team retreat at that church. So I don't know what you're talking about.
But I remember it so well, and I grew up in that area too. And I also remember talking to Bob and saying, this is before I was Catholic again, and I thought I was baptized at the time. Turns out I wasn't. And I wanted to go to confession because I had recently decided I wanted to become Catholic, like 3 months before. And so I thought, well, I believe things now. I'm totally on board with the church. Why do I have to wait until confirmation, or why do I have to wait until Easter Vigil in order for me to do my first confession?
Because baptism is the gateway to the sacraments, as canon law says.
Yeah, I didn't know any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yet. I was mostly just convinced that the church was the church that Jesus founded 2,000 years ago, and coming into contact with all these things. And I grew up in this church, and this is something that I came across in the Bible that I hadn't seen before. Do you have a Bible around here?
Well, I'm Catholic, so my Bible is missing right now.
That's okay.
I do have one around. Yeah.
In either case, I remember I was reading in 2 Timothy, Paul talking about the... Oh, there's one right there.
It's not the best translation, but it'll work.
What is it?
By the way, today we are going to end up talking at some point about philosophy and science based on an article I found regarding some things that Bill Nye, the anti-science guy at this point, is talking about. But this article is actually defending truth, but did so in a very poor way because it put science in opposition to philosophy. And as we explore this in a few minutes, we'll understand that we can't put those things in opposition.
Right.
But anyway, John, you were talking about 2 Timothy.
Long story short, in Timothy, Paul talks about those who will come and they will have a form of religion but deny the power of it.
Oh,
and
right.
they're also ticklers of ears, and they're after their guts and after their worldly success and all that jazz. And what was ironic about that was I remember growing up in my church. It was a prosperity gospel church, so you name it and claim it. You ask Jesus to give you health and wealth, and they looked like a religion because they had all these rituals.
Right.
They got together on Sundays. They read their Bible. They did their prayer and worship service. And it was always in this very orderly and systematic manner. So it looked like a religion, so it had the appearance of it. But they would always deny that they were a religion. They say, no, we're not a religion. We're a relationship with God. No, those Catholics, that's a religion, and it's dead works. That's all that they have are these dead, meaningless, Holy Spirit void works. And I'm thinking about this. Wait, hold on a second. I've never seen this before. So they're tickling ears. God will give you lots of money.
Yeah.
If you just come here and pray and tithe to us and plant your seed, and then they have this appearance of religion, and then they deny the power of it, because religion can be extremely powerful, the rituals that we go through.
Right.
And in fact, if you just continue with the consistent biblical definition of religion, it's the caring of widows and orphans.
Mm-hmm.
Pure and undefiled religion before the
From the
Father.
Book of James.
Yep, from the Book of James. And so it was just an interesting thing that I came across. I think I might write a blog post about it or something, because I've got a friend of mine.
Before blogs were cool.
Before blogs were cool, yeah. Back in the day when it mattered if you blogged. But I have a friend who, on Facebook, he and I met in a coffee shop about a year ago. And I was finishing up, I think, studying for my master's in theology for the cumulative examination. And he sat down next to me, and he saw that I was reading my Bible, and he came up to me and said something like, "How are you today?" I'm like, "I'm all right. How are you?" And he says, "I am justified, sanctified, glorified, now on my way to heaven. How are you?" I'm like, "I told you how I am." And I'm like, that was a really weird response. And anyway, it turns out he's a missionary, traveling missionary, and he does a lot of street preaching. He'll go to like McDonald's and talk to people who are sitting at their booths or as they're coming in the door, and you'll pray their prayer of salvation, and the sinners pray with them, which, that's fine. But he's always posting these things about Christianity is not a religion, it's a relationship, how religion is opposed to faith, etc., how Jesus hated religion, which is absurd.
Right.
For a number of reasons. I mean, he instituted rituals. He participated in the...
well, and it's interesting because I came across something recently where Jesus essentially discounted the Sadducees altogether. And the reason why he interacted so much with the Pharisees is that he actually saw their works as noble because they were trying to restore the Orthodox Jewish faith. The only problem was that they emptied the works of... or they emptied their works of the charity and love that was supposed to be within them. And so Jesus was reviling not the works they were doing, but that the works were emptied of other things, such as charity. But Jesus always looked at the works themselves of, worship in the temple and ritual sacrifice and these things as a good thing.
Right.
But that you're kind of missing the point on it. You need this, but you also need charity. Thus we get Pope Benedict's Truth and Charity encyclical.
And see, that was one of the interesting things about the various Jewish sects that were prevalent in the first century is that they each had a different means by which they were trying to bring about the Messiah and bring about the restoration of the kingdom.
Right.
And the Sadducees held a very, very, very strict adherence to the law. And they also rejected many of the books of the Old Testament that were not the Torah. So it was just pretty much they believed the 5 books of Moses. And that was about it. And they rejected...
Catholics know that as the Pentateuch.
Yep, the Pentateuch. And so they rejected things like the existence of angels and the immortality of the soul and a number of other things. And so Jesus had theological disagreements with him there. The Pharisees, their understanding of how to bring back the kingdom was by following the law, because how was the kingdom lost?
Right.
Okay.
By rejecting the law.
By rejecting the law, not following kosher, not keeping Sabbath. The Sadducees were more or less like, okay, yeah, cool, we can work with the Romans. This is fine. We don't see the big deal.
Right.
Which there was obviously a huge deal. You don't want to have them mixing around in the temple like that. I mean, Israel is supposed to be this place where the Gentiles can also come and worship God, but there had been there was a lot of political corruption that was going at the time at the level of the Sadducees, especially. You can go back into the books of Maccabees to see some of the roots with that.
Oh, the Maccabees! You know that Mel Gibson was going to do a movie on the Maccabean Revolt.
Yeah.
Before he kind of went a little off the wall, but it was just my all-time favorite movie has got to be Braveheart. I love that movie so much. Have you seen it?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Because if you haven't,
of course I have.
Yeah, it's such a great movie. And of course, The Passion of the Christ is second to none in terms of a movie on religion. I mean, it's just incredible. There are people that converted to the faith. I remember reading a story after The Passion first came out that a guy went to the theater and saw it, and I think it was down in Texas, and immediately after the movie he went to the police station and confessed to murder. Because he couldn't handle the guilt anymore of it. He was just convinced of the truth of the gospel. But then I heard about this Maccabean Revolt movie that Mel Gibson was going to do. It's like The Passion and Braveheart put together. Like, this could be the best movie ever made.
Dude, there was some wild stuff.
Mel Gibson, if somehow you are listening to this radio show, please do the Maccabean Revolt. John and I will even come and consult with you on the storyline and everything. Whatever you need to make it happen, we'll contribute what we can.
We will even act in it. All right.
No, we want it to be
My
good.
name is Jonathan, so I could be Jonathan Maccabee.
We want it to be good.
But I can act like a fool.
Yeah.
Which is what I'm rather good at, actually.
True.
But there's some... it would honestly be an awesome movie, because they've got battles, and they've got this golden... man clad in golden armor that comes down and fights on the behalf of Israel. You got a guy who throws his guts at people to chase them out of the temple, and spears and all sorts of wild things.
Oh yeah, it would be
intrigue. It could be a
pretty intense movie.
It could be a long movie too.
Mel Gibson has also recently talked about making a sequel to The Passion of the Christ.
Yes.
Which sounds weird if you haven't heard about it, but it's all about what happens between the crucifixion and the resurrection.
The horror of hell.
Jesus' descent into hell. Like, I think that would be incredible. I still would rather see the Maccabean Revolt movie, but I think this would be pretty intense.
Oh, yeah.
The difficulty of this movie is that there's not a lot of stuff that is absolutely known about that, other than we know from Scripture that there's two words for hell, Hades and Gehenna. And Gehenna is like the fires of hell that we know, that we visualize when we think of hell. And then there's Hades, which is also known as Abraham's bosom, or the resting place of the faithful, or the resting place of the just prior to Christ's coming. And my understanding of Christ's descent into hell is that he went to Hades to ransom the just souls. He didn't descend into the fires of hell, lest I'm sure the fires would be instantly quenched because of God's immediate presence. And that's my own philosophizing there. If we know anything from my studies, I'm a better theologian than a philosopher.
We'll go with that.
But my understanding is that Christ descended into Hades to ransom the souls of the just from this resting place that wasn't heaven, but wasn't the fires of hell.
Right.
But in that, I'm sure it would be a pretty powerful movie to I don't know, elaborate on that. I think it'd be certainly worthy of the work, but I want to see the Maccabean movie.
Now, there's actually a third word in Scripture. So,
okay.
Well, you can also say Sheol, but that just relates. So that's a very vague underworld.
Sheol is corresponding more to the Hades idea.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
But in the Hebrew, it's much more vague. It's just kind of this existence, a shadow existence.
Right.
But
it's not an existence of punishment, though, like Gehenna.
Yeah, not necessarily, yeah.
Right.
There's another one that actually supports what you're saying there, Tartarus.
Oh, right.
And I forget exactly where Paul uses that now that I'm thinking about it, but that actually refers to the angels.
Okay.
That they're trapped in Tartarus, which is like a prison.
Yeah.
A punishment prison for, in Greek literature, the Titans were put there.
Right.
So.
That's similar then to the Gehenna.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Fascinating
anyway.
stuff. We should do a whole episode, even though I don't think either one of us are well versed in it, but on eschatology, the four last things.
Sure.
It'd be fascinating, but we should probably do a little,
a little prep for that.
Work on that.
Yeah, maybe a little bit.
For today, though, talking about science and philosophy. Bill Nye recently, not so recently, whatever, for a while now, has been just going off the rails. He, of course, used to be known as Bill Nye the Science Guy. When I was in 6th, 7th, 8th grade, that middle school awkward time of life, I've grown out of the middle school part of that, but the awkward part I'm, stuck in indefinitely. I don't know, well, you are too, but that's why we're
Life
friends.
is better that way.
That's why we're friends. But Bill Nye, the science guy, really has turned more into Bill Nye, the anti-science guy at this point. He's talked about, throwing people in jail for being climate change deniers, which is ludicrous. I was just reading recently that, wherever you stand on the idea of climate change is fine. The climate certainly does change. The Earth naturally goes through heating and cooling periods.
It also has to do with the cycle of the sun.
Right, all kinds of things. If you want to believe in man-made global warming, you go ahead and feel free. In full transparency, I don't think that man is astronomically heating the Earth by carbon emissions. And that's my own position. You can Feel free to agree or disagree if you want. I'll be controversial and throw that out there.
I'll be very controversial and say I don't really care. Because my opinion on this is, I don't know. I feel like I'm kind of getting political burnout.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's so much fake news. People are spinning everything.
Okay, Donald Trump.
Hey. I've got some tremendous opinions that will change your mind big league.
Big league or big Lee?
I'll let you decide, all right? In any case, no, my opinion on it is if it is the case that we are damaging our ecosystem in such a way that it's actually affecting the Earth in a very profound way, then we should probably move more quickly on what we're doing. But I don't really think that on resolving those issues. But even if we aren't, I think that we're still damaging our ecosystem.
Sure.
We're polluting, we're wasting. I think I've heard that even just simply looking at food, for every one bite an American eats, the country as a whole throws away 2 bites.
Mm.
That is so much wasted food, which is wasted land space, which is wasted fuel and other resources, and that's just an atrocity.
Well, there's no doubt that we need to be good stewards of the land,
that's
and
my big thing,
Pope Francis has talked about this of we need to take care of our environment, and I personally don't think it's leading to some astronomical heating. There's been studies that have come out now that the Antarctica or the Arctic regions have actually gotten colder in the last 20 years or something. I've read that I laughed hard at this one. There was a ship that was bringing climate change researchers to the South Pole, and the ship got stuck in ice 100 miles before where they thought the ice sheet began, which obviously means that the climate's much colder than they suspected.
That's the sophistry here that comes in. Is like they started off with global warming, especially with what's his name? The guy who invented the internet, Al Gore.
By the way, he did not invent the internet. He claimed it, but he didn't actually invent it.
No, not at all.
The U.S. military invented it.
Yes, absolutely. But with his inconvenient truth, I mean, they predicted that by now we'd be under several feet of water in New York. But that's not the case.
Like 14 feet of water or something.
Right, and then and because the climate hasn't warmed up, or the world hasn't heated up to the extent that they predicted, what they've done is they've called it climate change.
Right.
Wow, you could drive a fleet of trucks through that definition and still meet it. It's ridiculous. And part of what bugs me.
Hang on, you don't want to drive a fleet of trucks though, because that'll give off more CO2 emissions.
That's true. I am an absolutely oh gosh, Jake, I am.
Drive a fleet of Priuses through it.
Yeah.
Oh, ironically though, I remember doing a study in one of my college courses on energy that Prius actually produces more harsh chemicals and all of that for the environment. It's more damage to the environment than a Hummer H2 because of the chemicals that go into the batteries and stuff.
Well, it's the batteries, and they got to fly them around the world because every part's made in different areas.
Right.
Insane.
Well, shipped. They don't fly parts, but
Well, fine.
I mean, I guess they might, but
they could. I don't know.
Usually cargo ships, which are not good. Anyway, this show isn't really about climate change. We're just kind of going off on a tangent, which we're really good at. If you listen to the show and you like the show, it's probably because of our tangents. If you hate the show, it's probably because of our tangents. But if you hate it, you're probably not listening anyway. So
who cares?
Who cares? Yeah. Well, we do care. We want to reach as many people as possible with the pursuit of truth, and that's what this is really getting into. Is Bill Nye has talked about all kinds of things, and regardless of where you stand on climate change. You probably shouldn't be thrown in jail over it. You're welcome to your opinion and things of that sort. He's talked about gender dysphoria, and we talked about gender dysphoria on the first show, and really we've wanted to talk about this more and more and more because it's just prevailing in our culture, but we don't want to, have the show only about that. But he's talked about gender dysphoria and praising the fact that people can be, one of 86 genders or whatever it is, or probably at this point you can probably be multiple genders at the same time. Who knows? But he at the same time talks about how, you're either two X's or an X and a Y chromosome, which means that there's either male or female.
Right.
But so he is all over the map on this stuff. And the reason why Bill Nye is coming up is because I ran across this article talking about why Bill Nye's stance is wrong and that he's more political than he is scientific at this point, which is absolutely the case. But the thing that really struck me in this article is this line that says, "Science is based off of fact, trial and error, and hard evidence. Politics is based off of opinion, philosophy, and how much money you can get for voting a certain way." Now, for any merit this article has had, it's completely out the window because of this one line. Studi, do you want to maybe elaborate on why this line is so bad? Because I could go off on a tangent.
Vacuum? I mean, this is ridiculous. I mean, what it sounds like to me is he sounds like he's equating philosophy with opinion and corruption.
Right.
Those three are the category. That's what your political opinion is based off of. And even beyond that, he talks about science is based off of fact, trial, error, and hard evidence. Okay, yeah, trial and error. That's a part of the scientific process.
Right.
In terms of empirical science.
Which, coincidentally, with trial and error, includes opinion. You have to posit an opinion on something in order to go through trial and error to prove it to be correct or incorrect.
Right.
So this author is already... what's the word I'm looking for? He's defeating himself.
Cutting off the branch he's sitting on.
Yeah, which is not advisable.
Well, even besides that, it didn't come out of a scientific method didn't come out of a vacuum. It's based off of induction. It's based off the first principles. It's based off of trusting the senses to be reliable. It's predicated on deductive truths as well.
And coincidentally, the scientific method actually made the vacuum.
Hey, Michael has been vacuuming a lot recently. It's super adorable. Every time Molly vacuums, he picks up one of those little popper toys.
Oh, I love those.
And he walks around and says, "Vacuum, vacuum," just everywhere. It's hilarious.
That's awesome.
So he's cleaning, which is good, but he doesn't actually clean. He just likes to pretend to clean.
Hey, he is a guy.
Irritating.
He is a man.
Actually. But anyway, and so it drives me nuts when people say that science is fact.
Right.
And that's it. In fact, this reminds me a bit of Hume's Fork, where he more or less says in his inquiries concerning human reason that everything is a relation of ideas, meaning tautologies, or that they are matters of fact. And by fact, he meant scientific evidence. Now, is there any issue with that argument that you can see right off the bat there, Jake?
Well, the first thing I want to point to, mostly because I just wasn't listening to you, I was thinking about other things, like
That's fine.
I need more coffee.
Me too.
But science, the root word for that in Latin is scientia, which is knowledge.
Right. Yeah.
So it's not merely about fact, it's about knowledge, which is about the formation of the person. Mm-hmm. We've talked about education before with the trivium and quadrivium, that knowledge and the pursuit of knowledge, pursuit of truth, is not simply about a mere list of facts. It's about the formation of the individual and the reception of truth, and the formation of the individual in the pursuit of truth, which means conforming yourself to what is real. And so if we just make science a list of facts, there's bigly problems in that, hugely problems in that. Thank you, Donald Trump. There's fact issues with Donald Trump too. By the
fact
way.
issues with everybody.
True.
You say this, and it's funny. It's about knowledge, and we would obviously argue that the highest knowledge is theology, the knowledge of God. And
wait, so you're positing that some knowledge is greater than other knowledge?
Yes, because of its subject matter.
So maybe within the realm of knowledge, there's a hierarchy?
A hierarchy, yeah.
So maybe then if knowledge is science, and knowledge is a hierarchy, is there a hierarchy within the sciences?
There could be.
There could be.
Huh. We'll have to explore that perhaps a little bit later.
Yeah.
But I had for my confirmation group, the year was focused a lot on apologetics, and I made them, for their final interview, not to tell me, what's the Immaculate Conception, or what is the Pope, or these little second grade questions that you ask high school kids. Rather, I made them fight me intellectually.
Okay, good.
They all won.
Because if you fought physically, that might not be good for, like, our insurance company or,
me having a job or not in jail.
Right.
Yeah, those things. So I got 4 of my adult volunteers, all of whom I know were very into their faith. Some of them were teachers. One of them had a master's in theology, and another one had a lot of experience in philosophy. And what I had the kids do is I had them prepare 4 1-minute-long responses to questions like, are faith and science opposed to each other? Or how do we know that God exists or that there's truth? Or how do we know if the Bible's reliable?
Yeah.
And the kids who prepared did very well. In fact, almost all of them got close to, if not 100%.
Wow.
They actually prepared very well.
Wow.
The ones who didn't prepare did not fare so well. And and some of them got less than 20 out of 35. And anybody who got less than 20 out of 35, I want them to have them redo it. And so I emailed one of the dads.
Wow, 20 out of 35 is pretty generous.
Yeah.
That's like,
I think so too.
That's like 60%.
And again, these are 4 1-minute responses, and I also asked them to do 1 2-minute response for a particular question that they wanted to study.
Sure.
Not all of them did that. In fact, most of them didn't, which is unfortunate. But I emailed one of the dads, and he calls me and says, John, we looked at this thing, the sheet you sent out, and we're thinking, John has all these degrees in grad school for theology and philosophy, and maybe this is just over my 9th grade son's head. His brain can't handle it. And I'm thinking, wait, hold on a second. This is the same kid who's doing physics and AP algebra in 9th grade. If he can handle physics and algebra, he can handle memorizing, understanding whatever, memorizing the moral argument for God's existence, which we talked about last week with Chris. Or why science and faith aren't opposed to each other.
Well, and this whole, because I've come across this too, where parents of kids I have worked with in 8th grade, 9th grade, whatever, they always, well, I shouldn't say always, I come across it frequently where parents cut their kids down and say, well, my kid isn't smart enough to do this, my kid isn't old enough to do this, my kid isn't this, isn't that, whatever. And all I end up hearing at the end of it really is that the parent is not smart enough to do this, is not educated enough to do this, because they are not comfortable with how difficult sometimes the questions are. But the questions aren't even hard. The crazy thing here is that what you're saying is this kid is in physics, is in AP algebra, is in all of this stuff. And in these classes, they are required to look at cause and effect. What happens if you change the plus sign to a minus sign? The effect changes. What happens in physics if you change the friction of something in motion? There is a necessary effect. And yet we can't take the same principles and tell them to think in a philosophical sense about things.
And give them 2 months to do it, and literally all the resources.
This is ridiculous.
Well, and it gets exactly to your point, too, where about not really forming knowledge, where the parents are okay with them going through all these mathematical formulations and having to memorize all that kind of stuff.
You know how many mathematical formulations I remember from high school?
How many?
None.
Okay.
I don't even remember what a plus sign looks like. No, I'm kidding. I know basic functions. I'm not a stupid individual. I'm fairly intelligent. But high school was all about memorizing facts. And it's not that math class was, okay, memorize this list and become a robot. But in the reality of it all, it was memorizing facts. It was not forming my mind. It wasn't forming the way I think to mathematical inquiry. It was just memorizing the facts of mathematics. It was ridiculous, and I don't remember any of that. So why would we expect kids to memorize just the facts of faith or the facts of philosophy and hope that they're somehow going to be better people for it?
Right. That's why I was having them do the arguments. Why do we believe this? And
right.
That kind of stuff.
Right.
And it was really encouraging. The ones that did prepare, and we can get back to Bill Nye the Science Guy here in a second here. The ones that did prepare talking to them, it was amazing. You could tell, even though they were a little bit nervous to sit down and talk with Studi or talk with Robert about, here are my arguments, especially because they knew that we were going to come back at them and they had to have an answer. They had confidence in it.
Yeah.
And it was a confidence that they did not have at the beginning of the year. In fact, there's one girl, she got, I think, the second highest score for the girls, or maybe third highest. And 2 years ago, the first thing she said to me on the first day of class when I said, are there any questions that you guys have before we really get started this year? And she said, I went to school at Nativity for 8 years. Why do I have to take any other classes? And then so I looked at her and said, I'm an atheist. Prove me that God exists, or I'm walking away not only missing out on the greatest good that I could possibly come to know, but I'm also going to walk away looking at the church as a bunch of people who believe in a bunch of fairy tales, and I'm going to think of you as somebody who is completely discredited as an example of what it means to be a good Catholic. Prove to me that God exists. Silence. Now, this girl, sweet, just like the kindest, gentlest person I've ever met, and she pays attention in class very well. But then she came and back to do her interview this last week, and she just did extraordinarily well.
Great.
And she has a great confidence. So it's a beautiful story, I think.
And that's because you made her memorize a list of facts?
Yeah, that's exactly what I did. yeah, I didn't walk her through the whole thing over
you
2
formed
years.
her as a person. And this is the whole thing with science versus philosophy, is that this seeming opposition to each other is a complete straw man argument, a red herring, whatever you want to call it. It's not actually there. There is no real opposition.
No.
And just like there's no opposition between religion and science, there can't be, because if the whole point of religion is the pursuit of truth in terms of who I am and who God is, then how could that be opposed to science, which is in pursuit of truth in terms of who I am and what is the world?
Well, the thing is, truth doesn't contradict truth. Falsity does. Right. Methods don't contradict methods. If we're trying to get to the same end through different means, and if we're trying to, or going after different ends within those, within a particular genus of ends, like the scientific method tends to try to examine the material world and to some extent efficient causes, but only secondary efficient causes. Whereas philosophy has a much broader scope of its study. And so because there are some things in philosophy which do seem a little nutty, like epistemology. I hate epistemology. It drives me nuts. Not all of it.
Epistemology is the study of knowledge.
Study of knowledge.
It's how do we know.
How do we know what we know that we know that we know? Which Bill Nye actually, he has a video out there talking about philosophy, and that's immediately where he goes. It's like, philosophy is always coming up with these answers that are unsurprising, and they're always asking questions like, how can we be sure that we're not sure that we are sure? And do I really exist? Are we all living on a giant ping pong that's being played by some sort of giant ping pong players?
My issue with epistemology is not epistemology in and of itself. It's that's where people immediately go when they think of philosophy.
Right.
And epistemology, admittedly, is not an easy subject to really grasp, because how do we know? But the very notion that we're able to inquire about how we know means we have some knowledge. So where did that initially come from? Yeah. And there's, you got to keep going back, and really I think you can look at either one of St. Thomas's first two arguments for God to get to the heart of epistemology. The uncaused cause, the unmoved mover, because knowledge emanates from somewhere, and you can't go back ad infinitum. Infinitum.
There we
Thanks.
Go.
My Latin isn't the best. But the problem is that people immediately go to epistemology when they think of philosophy, and that's probably the wrong place to start, because it is a difficult thing. The first place to start is, simple terminology. And so people give epistemology a bad name, because in philosophy a bad name because they set up these arguments from epistemology that they have no idea what they're even talking about, including Bill Nye.
Oh, absolutely. No.
And other people, and I'm going to throw a few names out here because they're people we should be wary of. Stephen Hawking, brilliant in physics.
Right.
not brilliant in metaphysics. They're two totally different fields, and they should not be opposed to each other.
Sure.
But to be trained in metaphysics is something entirely different than to be trained in physics. And so when he posits metaphysical argumentation, I just tune him out. If I want to know about physics, he's the first guy I go to. But metaphysics, totally different thing. Same with... what's his name? DeGrasse?
Neil deGrasse Tyson?
Yeah, Neil deGrasse Tyson. Same thing. Brilliant in physics.
Great speaking voice.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, my God.
Brilliant in physics, but metaphysics, not so much. And there's a few other atheistic I was going to say physicians, but they're not physicians. Physicists, there we go. A couple other brilliant physicists that, delve into the realm of metaphysics, but they come at it from a foundation of everything must be material.
Right.
And the term metaphysics already negates their initial thesis that everything must be material, because metaphysics is above what is physical. It's greater than the physical. So if you come at it from, well, everything in existence is necessarily physical, you're already wrong. And the greater the degree of error at the beginning means the greater degree of error at the end.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's true. I wrote a paper for my ancient and medieval philosophy course, and that was one of the things that I addressed was this physicalism. But because it was an ancient and medieval philosophy course, I went to Democritus, who posited that there was nothing but the atoms and the void. And the void is nothingness. Is essentially what the Greek word means there. Yeah. That's what he was really meaning, is that there's nothing but atoms. And if there's any gap or space between stuff, then it's really nothing. Or the reason why you can why things are divisible is because they are separated by nothingness. And the atoms themselves is like automonon, which means indivisible. Okay. And so that's a very basic particle of matter. And now one of the issues with a monist worldview like that is that you wouldn't actually be able to have different kinds of things, because within a genus doesn't contain its own specific difference. So within animality itself does not contain rationality. It comes from a different kind of species, kind of thing. But if there's only one genus, namely atoms, or the physical world, then there is going to be there's going to be no way to actually produce different kinds of things. Sure. Logically speaking. So it's not only a problem of metaphysics, but it's also a problem of logic.
Sure. Yeah. So
which I don't get.
Right. Ultimately, this coming back to this article, equating philosophy with opinion and science with fact really misses the mark on both accounts. Yes, science does have facts. It does have hard evidence. But so does philosophy. And one of the last lines in here, it says, if Nye is truly a man of science, he should be willing to stand back, look at the evidence in front of him, and conclude that there is not more than two genders, or that throwing people in jail for being a climate denier is going a little too far. Well, it's funny because what this person is doing is actually engaging in philosophy.
Yep. He's contradicting himself there, too.
Right, because the idea of throwing people in jail for being a climate denier is going a little too far. That's a philosophy. That's not something rooted in what they're saying is hard evidence, trial and error, fact, and therefore science. It's engaging in a philosophical debate about the role of justice, about how to execute what is just in a society.
Or fair the people in this case.
Right. And so the idea of stand back and look at the evidence in front of you is actually the basis not only for maybe the scientific method, but for philosophical inquiry. And this idea of, I don't think we ever quite got to it, the idea of philosophy is necessarily opinion and science is necessarily fact, and you only have those two options, is Hume's fork. And we never actually, I don't think, elaborate on that, so maybe if you want to finish that.
Well, yeah, basically Hume's fork is saying that, again, it comes from his inquiries concerning human understanding, saying that everything is a relation of ideas, meaning tautology, like a bachelor is an unmarried man. Great, thanks.
A tautology is kind of an if-then statement?
No, that's modus ponens. A tautology is where the term is contained within the definition. And so a bachelor...
Oh, sure.
Yeah, a bachelor is an unmarried man. Or
right.
The sun is a star in the sky. I mean,
right.
It's like, well, yeah.
The term contains the definition.
Yeah, the term contains the definition.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that doesn't always... Say, moving on.
Yeah. I just want to help our listeners out here.
Moving on. So it's tautological. It means it doesn't need to be centered. It's like basically repeating the same thing twice in different words. Or it's matters of fact. So it's scientific evidence. It's repeatable, sensible, empirical.
An oak is a tree.
Yeah, an oak is a tree. Yeah. That would be a tautology. Of course, an oak is a tree. What's wrong with you? Of course.
A Dodge is a car.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the problem with Hume's fork is that it is neither a tautology nor is it a matter of scientific fact either. So there's some issues with that. And I think this guy is actually falling into that inadvertently.
Well, our culture falls into that constantly.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. If it's not scientific fact, it's opinion. It's like, well, is that an opinion or is that a fact?
Right.
Which is funny how pervasive some of these modernists have been able to...
Yeah, you know what? That just hit me. And I love when this happens.
What just hit you?
So let's say you and I are conversing, as we are, and I say something and you go, well, that's not a fact, therefore it's your opinion.
Yeah.
Well, that's your opinion, this Hume's fork idea. You're positing your opinion, but you're positing it as a fact.
Right.
So how can you then say that, as a fact, my opinion is wrong if your opinion... It just
this is
crazy.
It drives you nuts. It makes me so mad too, because I had some friends who were like this too, where we would make an argument and I'd go off. We'd find a common starting point, and then I would do a syllogism, and then we get to the conclusion, and then they'd say, "Well, maybe," or "That's your own opinion. That's what you believe." And it's like, well, I can believe it, but it can also be false,
right?
Or I could believe it, or it could also happen to be objectively true for all people at all times.
Yeah.
Those are opinions. Those are possibilities as well. And I think it's funny that he gets here. He says, if Nye is truly a man of science, he should be willing to stand back, look at the evidence in front of him, and conclude that there are not more than two genders, or that throwing people in jail for being a climate denier is going a little too far. And that that saying it's going too far is interesting, because that actually comes right down to one of the limitations of the scientific method. The scientific method can tell us that very reliably, if we put arsenic in our grandmother's tea, that she will die. But it cannot tell us whether or not that we should put it in there.
Well,
it can't give us certain information. It can't give us certain guidance. And one of those areas is these matters of justice and of politics and of morality as a whole. The scientific method simply cannot do that. It can give us some interesting places to start, like if we know that arsenic kills our grandmother and we don't want to kill our grandmother, then we probably shouldn't put arsenic in our tea.
Right.
I think that is pretty obvious. And also the evidence in front of him. What does he mean by that? Well, I think it's really funny. In one of the later episodes of Bill Nye Saves the World, number one, weirdest thing I've seen in my entire life. I watched some of that episode, and he had this music video. Jake, did you see this music video?
About
with Rachel Leigh Cook?
Yeah, it was not good.
That was the most cringe-worthy thing I've seen in my entire life.
Not to mention just the vocals were not.
Oh, that was terrible.
Good, but
terrible.
The lyrics were scary.
I'm not sure what was worse, the song itself or Bill Nye jamming to it. It was really weird. What is he, like 100 or 50 years old, and he's like sitting there jamming to this awkward song. But
it was not good.
And he shows these like these three silhouettes of people with all these chromosomes floating in and out of their bodies and everything. And one's like XXY, one's YXY, and then one's two X's, and then one's just an X or what have you. And he's talking about how this is simply just normal. Everybody has a spectrum of XY chromosomes, and there isn't really like one hard male, one hard female out there. And then that's not the case for one. He's misrepresenting it. It's less than it's less than like 1,000% of people who have some sort of abnormality with their chromosomal makeup.
Right.
But what was funny is immediately after that episode came out, if somebody had drawn up a clip from one of Bill Nye's older shows where he is actually teaching that, right from conception, you will get either two X chromosomes or an X and a Y chromosome, and your chromosomes determine your gender. And Netflix has subsequently removed that episode from their queue. It makes you wonder if anybody's trying to engineer the culture socially.
Yeah, there's no narrative going on.
Not at all.
Well, in the last, I think we kind of beat that horse to death, that article. I think right now maybe in the last, 10 minutes here, talk about the hierarchy of sciences, because we alluded to that and we want to fulfill the tease from earlier about talking about this. It's one thing to talk about it in the world. We see this all the time, where politics or philosophy or science or religion, all these things are put in opposition to each other. It's rare we see where they're put into harmony with each other. And so I think maybe just talking about how there are practical and theoretical sciences, because the only thing we really get are the practical sciences. We get some theoretical, but even the theoretical sciences that we see happening in the world and being practiced are only to do with empirical things, so only material. And so I know St. Thomas treats this in his Summa Theologica, but the idea that there's a practical science and a theoretical science, and even among the practical and theoretical sciences, there's a hierarchy within them. So some practical sciences are, in fact, better than others. How do we determine what's higher and what's lower in the hierarchy? And then how do we put things in the practical versus theoretical sciences?
All right. What do you think, Jake?
Well, you're the I'm the theologian. You're the philosopher.
I just make stuff up as I go along. Stuff up.
Like words.
Yeah, like words as I go along. So stuff. It's the new definition for
stuff.
Stuff up. Moving on. So no, basically the way that Thomas talks about it is that every science is ordered according to the height of its object. And so for Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas, the lowest science would actually be physics, because it's understanding things as we find them in terms of theoretical sciences. It's studying things in terms of its physical makeup and how that works. The next step up from physics would be mathematical physics, where you've abstracted the behavior of physical things, of material things, to the level of mathematical precision. And then after that, you start entering into ethics, actually, where you start studying the study of the nature of human behavior, and then you get metaphysics, and then after metaphysics, you have theology, which theology is the highest of sciences, because it's studying the highest and most knowable thing. Because what Aristotle talks about starting in his book on the physics is that we move from general to particular, from what is more known to us but less known in itself, to what is less known to us but more known in itself, where we have a very immediate grasp of the physical things around us. That's the first thing that we know. But there's only so much you can say about an atom. There's only so much you can say about a tree. But as we keep on moving up the hierarchy of being, we find more and more intelligibility between atoms and rocks and trees and birds and then people and then angels, or the celestial bodies, which it's celestial intellects that Aristotle talks about, and then the most intelligible thing is God.
Right.
Which is hard for us to really understand him to begin with at all. But once we do start our study of God or theology, we've come to a subject matter that is inexhaustible.
Right.
That's how we structure the hierarchy of knowing. Is not through what is more known to us, but what is more known in itself.
Sure. The nobility of the end, or the end towards which the science acts.
Yeah.
Or the end towards which the science seeks to discover. So then within the theoretical and practical idea, well, practical should be somewhat obvious. It's sciences that have some sort of practice or some sort of direct application to a subject. Theoretical kind of remains up in the clouds. It's why things are able to act as they act. So some examples of theoretical sciences are metaphysics, pure mathematics, theoretical physics, kind of just looking at the theory behind why a practice can happen. The practical sciences, some include things like engineering, fine arts, medicine, psychotherapy, ethics, spiritual direction, things of the sort. It's applying a theory into daily life. So, for instance, spiritual direction. That's an applicable science. It's a practical science because you're taking things learned in theology and applying it to somebody's daily life. And so theology is a theoretical science, but it derives practical applications. And that's the goal, at least in part of theoretical sciences, is it produces the framework by which to put things into practice. So we have things like pure mathematics, theoretical physics. As we study these things and we elaborate our knowledge in these areas, it produces things like human biology, right? Mathematics and physics, we derive another science in terms of biology. Well, biology has very practical applications.
Sure does.
In even lower down than that would be medicine. We can't derive medicine without human biology. To do so would be insanity. Here, John, take this liquid I found in the street. It'll make you feel better.
Oh, great. Fantastic.
Yeah. That doesn't work so well. And so things like medicine need to be derived from human biology. Human biology is derived from theoretical science of things like mathematics, physics, that sort of thing. And so we see a hierarchy even in the interplay of practical and theoretical science. And by saying a lower good, it's not that medicine is a lower good, but that it's derived from something else. It can't simply just go on ad infinitum or infinitum. And so we need to have sciences that build the framework for the actual practical application. And so that's more the interplay between practical and theoretical science.
We need them both.
We absolutely do need them both. You can't really have one without the other. They don't make sense without each other.
Well, that's theologically speaking one of the things that I appreciate about the Catholic faith. This is going to sound kind of tangential, but it'll fit, I think.
Okay. We have like 2 minutes.
2 minutes. All right. Faith alone. You just believe. All right. Fantastic. It's all on the intellect, and that your justification doesn't relate to your action like it does with the Catholic Church. And so here we have the theoretical. Do I believe that Jesus is the Son of God, that He was crucified and resurrected for my sins, and that by faith in Him I can come to knowledge of God? Great. That's a theory, and that's a part of what we need to have in order to be saved. But does it relate to the rest of my nature? Does it relate to my will? Well, my ethic has to follow upon that. The practical aspect has to follow upon my theory. And that's one thing that I think Protestants are missing, is they're not really encompassing the full human person when it comes to their own soteriology or their study of salvation.
Sure.
And they've taken the theoretical and seen it as the only thing that we need. They've made us into angels. Angels don't need practical sciences.
Right.
Because all they need is knowledge.
Right.
They don't have different actions that they take in the same sense that we do. And so in the same way, angels, all they would need is faith. That's not how we are. We have to have faith, and we have to have ethics, and we have to have all these other things that follow upon our theories in order to fully live a human life that's going to be happy.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, angels don't have faith. All that remains in heaven is charity.
Yes.
So they don't need faith because they're perfect in their being in terms of knowledge.
Sure, but I think maybe, I don't know, I was looking at this actually. At the first instant of their creation, they had to have faith
right.
in terms of trust of God.
Right.
And
I'm talking in terms of now.
In terms of now,
yeah.
whatever that means with eternity.
Right. Right.
All that jazz.
Yeah.
Yeah, right now it's just charity.
Yep.
Because they see the good and they're willing.
Maybe angelology another week. Maybe we can get
a
guest priest in here or something.
You know, Zimmer's actually likes angelology.
Well, there you go. We should get somebody in here who knows a lot about it and do that. As far as coming weeks, please feel free to send us an email at lostvoice at wcatradio.com. That's lostvoice at wcatradio.com. You can find that email address on our show page. Send us questions, comments, ideas for shows. We want to talk about what you want to listen to. This show is a service to your life, not a service unto ourselves, because, well, we don't need any more reasons to be self-serving for Studi and I. But send us your ideas, your comments, your questions, all of that stuff.
Also your concerns.
Yes.
Please send us your concerns.
Yes.
In prayers. But for the Lost Voice Radio, this is John Studi along with Jacob Nelson signing off, and we hope to see you or hear from you guys sometime in the near future. God bless.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.